What's up, internet? My name is Kyle, back with another episode about cameras, tech, and all that good stuff. Today, we're going to talk about 8 tips about how to take sharper photos. All right, I got a list here because apparently I can't remember 8 things. It's just impossible. Okay, so number 1 is very, very important. Probably the most important out of all of these things is shutter speed. If you don't know what shutter speed is, it's how long the shutter is open, exposing your sensor to light. Now, for a sharp photo, typically what you want is a faster shutter speed. Now, it of course depends on what you're shooting. If you're shooting, say, somebody that is walking, a shutter speed at 1/250th of a second is probably going to be sufficient. However, it totally depends on what you're shooting. You could be shooting sports, which may be like 1/1000th of a second, or a lot higher, depending if it's like pro athletes or little 6-year-olds playing soccer. So you'll want a faster shutter speed for things that are moving so you can freeze the image and get the sharpest image possible. However, if you're shooting something that's like standing still, like an orange or an apple, which they don't have feet, so they stand still. I guess you could throw an orange in a picture and try and freeze the orange in the midair, but I'm not gonna do B-roll of throwing an orange. I don't have one right now, but just picture it, like throwing an orange and trying to freeze it. Fast shutter speed, orange sitting on a table, slower shutter speed. However, if you're holding your camera handheld, you're going to have imperfections in your grip and holding it still, so you're gonna wanna do a little faster shutter speed for when you're hand holding a camera. So even with an orange sitting on a table and not moving at all, you're still gonna wanna compensate for any movement with your hands, fingers, or camera. Usually you can get away with like 1/60th of a second shutter speed, even handheld. Also, real quick before I get deeper into the video, I just want to thank Skillshare for sponsoring today's video. If you don't know what Skillshare is, it's an online learning platform with thousands of videos from thousands of different creators just like me. Just like you're learning about getting sharper images from your camera, you can also learn a whole bunch of other things on Skillshare, like cooking, even photography, or learning a new language. If you guys are interested, there is a link down in the description and the top line of the description for 2 months free with Skillshare. Huge thanks to Skillshare for hooking you guys up, and if you want to try it, link down below. Okay, and now back to our video. Now, of course, if you're not in manual mode, you're not gonna have control over the shutter speed. However, you can use something like shutter priority, where you only have control over shutter speed, and you can just focus on that and kind of go over what I just talked about. Okay, number 2 is going to be picking a single autofocus point. Now, the Sony a6000 has a bunch of different focus areas you can use. You can do wide, flexible spot, bunch of center, zone. You would want to use flexible spot and move the focus point onto exactly the point that you want in focus to give you the sharpest image possible, especially on the focus point that you choose. If you use something like wide focus area, it's gonna probably choose what's closest to the camera. It's gonna choose a couple focus points. If you use flexible spot on the Sony a6000, other cameras have this ability as well. Pick the single focus point that you want the camera to focus on to get the sharpest image in the most specific way possible. Number 3 is OSS, or optical steady shot, at least in the Sony world. And this is a stabilization inside your lens. Now, all lenses do not have this. All lenses are not created equally. However, the kit lens for the Sony a6000 has it. The 35mm f1.8 has it. The 18-105G f4 lens has it. So a couple of the Sony lenses have OSS. Now, this is something you can turn off or on. By default, it's probably on when you get a lens with OSS. And what this allows you to do is to shoot at slower shutter speeds handheld, so it takes out the micro jitters, especially in video. And in photo, like I said, if you are in a lower light situation, you can use a slower shutter speed to let in a little more light, and you can get a sharp photo even at the slower shutter speeds. OSS is typically something that makes a lens more expensive. If you're ever looking in the market at different lenses and wondering why one's not as expensive as the other, it may be lens stabilization. However, like I said, the kit lens does have OSS, so that's pretty cool. Okay, the next tip is going to be lens sharpness, or the aperture sweet spot of your lens. Now, believe it or not all lenses are created equally. Different lenses are more expensive because they have better optics, better glass inside the lens, and different lenses versus other lenses have different aperture sweet spots. Now, what I mean by this is that there is going to be an aperture that is the sharpest within the range that your lens can go to. Now, for example, the Sony kit lens for the a6000, the 16 to 50 power zoom, its sharpest aperture is probably f8. It can go down to f3.5, but you're going to have softer corners. It's not going to be sharp across the frame at f3.5 versus f8. And then it is also important to note that on prime lenses, such as the Sony 35mm f1.8, f1.8 is not its sharpest aperture. If you look online, people think that f2.8 is actually the sharpest aperture on the Sony 35mm f1.8. Now, that doesn't defeat the whole purpose of having a f1.8 lens, but just keep in mind that not all lenses are their sharpest at their most wide open aperture. Next is, I feel like in all of these type of videos about getting sharper images, it always has to be included, and that's because it is such a great tip that everybody overlooks, and that's using a tripod. I have a basic Amazon Basics tripod. I actually kind of hate it. I wouldn't recommend it unless you want something really cheap, and hey, it works. However, what a tripod allows you to do is to use slower shutter speeds, which allows you to bring your ISO down, get a very clean image, and there is no camera shake or human error with the tripod. You can get the sharpest image possible. A lot of people use a tripod for long exposure or astrophotography or anything where the shutter speed has to be slow enough to where basically a human couldn't hold it and get the same result. A couple mini tips when using a tripod is you're gonna want to use something where you're not physically pressing the shutter button, because even if you have it on a tripod and you press down the shutter button, unless you're a ninja or have some crazy ability, you're going to move the camera. So if you didn't graduate from a ninja dojo, you're gonna use a self timer. I myself like to use the 2-second self timer on A6000. You press it down, it beeps a couple times, and then boom, takes a photo without any camera movement from your human dumbness. Or at least me. I always move the camera by accident, so a self-timer is just a lifesaver. You could also use a wireless shutter remote or a wired one, or even use the mobile app to take photos. If you have a tripod and you've never used it, go ahead, set it up inside, even in your living room or something. Take a picture of something with a slower shutter speed, the lowest ISO you can go, maybe even test out the sweet spot aperture of your lens and give it a shot, and just compare those results to trying to hold the camera handheld with the same exact settings and see what you get. I guarantee you the tripod shot is going to be sharper. You may get it close, I challenge you, try and take an equally as sharp shot, same settings at like a 5-second shutter speed on a tripod, off a tripod. Tripod's gonna win. I'm sorry. The stick with the feet, it's gonna beat you. It's gonna beat you. You're just a human. Okay, and the next tip, I must say, it sounds like I'm an old man when I'm saying this, but take your time. Now, I feel like the whole first year I owned a camera, I got a prime lens, I was out there running, gunning, just shooting everything and anything under the sun, and my images weren't the sharpest. Now, the whole reason behind that is because I wasn't taking my damn time. If you take your time, have a little patience, just take a breath, focus on what you're doing instead of, shooting with one hand or only looking at the back of the screen. Use your viewfinder. just take a second, take your time. It will just pay dividends in the end. Okay, the next tip kind of rolls in with the last one, is having better technique. Now, for example, this is the 18-105 on the A6000. It is obviously a top heavy setup. However, if you're holding it like, like this, it's not going to be as stable as if you use your other hand, the non-shutter hand, and use it underneath the barrel of the lens. It's going to give you better results. Another tip is to bring your arms in on your body. It's kind of hard for you to see on this angle, I think, but if you have your arms loose like this, it's not going to give you as good of results. You don't have as much kind of stabilization if you do this. You bring your arms in, your elbows aren't going past your body, and you can just get a more stable shooting environment than your arms all flapping all around. Bringing out the old school here, DSLR. It's got dust all over it. It was sitting on my shelf, but it has a camera strap. So same thing technique-wise, is you can use the camera strap to get tension with the strap and hold it out. Use your neck as leverage here, and you can use this to be a lot more stable than if you had the strap off of you and you're just trying to hold it like this. Either, off your body in, or use the camera strap and extend it out. And this is so much more stable, and you will get sharper photos. Look at this ancient guy with all of the hair and stuff on it. This is my girlfriend's Canon Rebel T3. Can you see that? Can you see it? There you go. Yeah, we used to use these when we first met, but now we have the Sony a6000s, mirrorless for life. Well, until there's something better. Yeah. Okay, so the last thing is not something that's in camera or, technique wise. It is post-processing sharpening. I have two things about sharpening in, whatever editor of choice. I use Adobe Lightroom, and I never, ever, ever go to 100% sharpening. If you do that, it's gonna turn the image super crunchy. It's going to basically over detail the image. And especially if you print something, you don't wanna go crazy on the sharpening. It will just flat out ruin the image. The other thing, especially in Lightroom, is you can do sharpen masking, where you can use the masking and see what parts of the photo you're actually going to sharpen. And that's a great way to kind of just accentuate those small details that you want, or if you want to sharpen the entire image up a little bit, you can do that with masking. It's a great way to kind of pinpoint things. I loved finding out about that in Adobe Lightroom. All right, I think that is actually it for the sharp photos, tips, tricks, and what have you. But yeah, that is it. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you want any other tips, kind of like the sharp photos and stuff like that, let me know in the comments, and I will be more than happy to take a look at some of your ideas for future videos. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you guys in the next episode. Later.